Welcome to this community conversation on election security, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Boulder County. My name is Elizabeth Crow. I'm serving as the League of Boulder County president, and I'm so happy to be here tonight with all of you to address the important topic of election security. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. The League has worked for more than 100 years to encourage informed and active participation in government and influence public policy through education and advocacy. To remain nonpartisan, the League never supports or opposes political candidates or parties. With Election Day right around the corner, if you haven't filled out your ballot yet, please visit vote411.org, the League's award-winning online voter resource, for individualized information you need on ballot issues and candidates, all available in English and in Spanish. The League's candidate forums, ballot issue presentations, and other local voter information is also available on our website at lwvbc.org on our 2021 election webpage. And lastly, the League invites anyone, we are not just for women, to join us in voter service and advocacy efforts. Visit lwvbc.org or send over a note in the chat if you'd like some more information. After the 2020 election, the League of Women Voters renewed its focus on advancing a stronger, more representative American democracy. The League's Women Power Democracy platform renews League efforts to, quote, combat the influx of lies with trusted and accurate information and build and restore the public trust in our democracy. We here in Colorado can be proud of our state's leadership and progress towards increasing voter access to elections and in election security. Part of the League's role is not only to explain why voters can have confidence in our election system, but also to expand election trustworthiness and accessibility nationwide. We're very pleased tonight to feature two significant Colorado public officials charged with conducting a safe, secure, and accurate election. Molly Fitzpatrick was elected as Boulder County Clerk and Recorder in 2018 and took office in January 2019. Her current term continues through early January 2023. As Boulder County Clerk and Recorder, Molly oversees 3 divisions, including elections, motor vehicle, and recording. Prior to becoming county clerk, she worked with New Era Colorado, registering young, new voters and helping them to navigate the election process. Since taking office, Molly has overseen 4 elections. The last 2 of these elections were done under pandemic conditions. As clerk, Molly has prioritized the advancement of processes designed to enhance integrity, accuracy, accessibility, and security in the elections process, and has worked to demonstrate these values to the public. Hilary Rudy is the Deputy Director of Elections for the Colorado Secretary of State's office. Over the course of her career, Hilary has worked closely with county election officials in implementing new processes and procedures. She was instrumental in implementing several statewide projects, including the rollout of the statewide voter registration system and the development and deployment of the military and overseas voter ballot delivery system. In addition to partnership with the division's training manager, Hilary has worked to develop and deliver county election certification and overseeing the division fellowship program to mentor future election administrators. Hilary continues to expand her expertise. She gained Certified Elections Registration Administrator, or CERA, status in 2016. If you do have questions or comments tonight, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom bar. Just type in your question or comment, and our Zoom moderator, who is also our operations director, Mandy Nuku, will invite you to come off mute and ask it yourself. We may not have enough time to get to all questions and comments, so we appreciate your patience and understanding. And now we're happy to begin with a presentation from Hilary Rudy. Welcome, Hilary, and please go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. Let me just share my screen here. Right. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Colorado's election model as a whole. And it's really difficult, I think, to talk about the security without also talking about access, because Colorado does a magnificent job of balancing access and security. And voter registration is really the backbone of our election model. Some of the key features of that are automatic voter registration and updates with Department of Revenue. We began doing automatic updates in 2019 and expanded to automatic registration in 2020. And it's been an incredibly successful program, increasing the registered voters, increasing the accuracy of the registration list. We also have 16-year-old pre-registration. So voters who are 16 can pre-register to vote and then become active when they're 18 and old enough to receive their first ballot in the mail. And partnered with that, we have our high school registration challenge. The Eliza Pickle Route Award is awarded to any high school that registers at least 85% of eligible high school seniors. So we work with a lot of community organizations to help implement that and support them in helping high schools achieve that award. Other features include online voter registration. You can register, update, you can withdraw your registration, all of that with a driver's license. And you can register with a social security number beginning in early 2022. So that's a recent expansion to help folks get registered and be ready to vote. And then of course, same day registration. A big significant component of Colorado's model is that you can go in any day, including election day, and register or update your registration before you vote. And of course, keeping all of the records current is a really important component from a security standpoint. So there are layers to list maintenance that county clerks do quarterly, monthly, daily. So they receive lists from the U.S. Attorney's Office, from the Department of Corrections, and from the Department of Public Health and Environment and Social Security Administration, so that we can cancel records for voters who are ineligible because they are deceased or because they're incarcerated and serving a felony conviction. And we get those records from the Department of Corrections now on a daily basis, and that's transitioned from a monthly basis beginning in 2008. So a lot of lists coming in to help us maintain all of those records. In addition to all of the state lists, we also receive information for national change of address. And then every 2 years following general elections, we also cancel records for voters who have appeared to have moved. So we have information from the post office that they appear to have moved, and then they have had no voter activity for at least 2 general elections. So there's a lot of activity that occurs to keep the list up to date so that when we mail those ballots, they're going only to voters who have a current mailing address. And that's Colorado's model. We mail a ballot to every active voter. So that means their registration is current and we've got a current mailing address. But Colorado's kind of like the Burger King of elections, if you want to think about it that way. However you'd like to vote is how you can vote. We mail a ballot to every active voter, but we also have vote centers in every county where you can register, you can update, you can get a replacement ballot, you can vote that day if you prefer. So we have full service vote centers that really let you handle any transaction that you need to, but really allow you to vote in the way that you choose to vote, which is important. We also have some different mailing timelines. So we mail ballots to military and overseas voters 45 days before the election. So there's time to get those ballots out and back. And then here in the States, we give 22 days to get those ballots out. So let's talk a little bit about in-person voting, because that's still an option in Colorado. If you go in person to vote, you need to present an acceptable form of ID. There are more than a dozen options that are available. And that's everything from a driver's license to a college ID to a utility bill. In every vote center, we have a current e-poll book, which is actually an application of the statewide voter registration system. So it's real time and it tracks whether you've already voted in the election. So you've returned your mail ballot or you've already voted in person, then it doesn't allow, the system won't allow the election judge to issue a new ballot. We also have accessible ballot marking devices in every polling location. So if a voter who goes in needs a ballot marking device, they can do that, and it produces a paper ballot in the same manner as if you had marked it with a pen. It may look a little different, but it still produces a paper ballot that will be tabulated, which is a very important component of Colorado's election model. All of the ballots, including the ballots from the ballot marking devices, are paper ballots, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit. And then there's also the provisional safeguard. So even though we have mail ballots, we have same-day registration, we still have a provisional ballot available to make sure that folks are able to vote if there seems to be some issue. And then a newer feature is we have a statewide ballot. So there's no wrong polling place to go into any longer. If you're away from your home, you're not going to be able to get home in time to vote. If you go into a different county, you can vote a statewide ballot that at least includes the statewide races or issues, and then you can get that ballot back to be counted. So mail ballots, obviously a very large component of Colorado's model. So when you get your ballot, you sign the back, and then that signature is verified against the signature that you have on file in the statewide voter registration system. So we verify the signature on every affidavit, and if two judges agree that it doesn't match, then we'll send the voter a letter and give them an opportunity to cure that. And voters have until 8 days after the election day to cure. So there's a little bit of time post-election day to get that done. We have secure 24-hour drop boxes all over the state. So it's easy to drop a ballot off locally. You don't have to rely on the mail. You can do that in your community. And ballots are collected daily and sometimes more frequently, depending on how full those boxes get. And this gives options to voters so that they don't have to give their ballot to somebody else or, again, rely on the post office. Voters can still give their ballot to someone else to deliver for them, but no one can deliver more than 10 ballots other than their own for an election. Voters can sign up to track their ballots so they can receive email, text, or voice notifications when the ballot's mailed, when the clerk gets it back, when it's ready for counting. We started this statewide in 2020. It was very popular, and we're very excited to be able to continue that service. So you can sign up on govotecolorado.gov and track your ballot there. We also rolled out a new opportunity to cure in 2020. So for those voters who have a signature issue, we have a new text to cure platform, which allows voters to submit that cure electronically via a mobile device. We have processes in place so that for folks who are living in group residential facilities who may be more vulnerable, there are rules that help make sure they're protected, and the clerk has folks who deliver and return those ballots from those facilities. I mentioned our military and overseas voters, where we send those ballots out 45 days before the election. They have some options available outside of the mail, depending on what their circumstances are. But they can get that ballot back to us securely electronically if they need to do that. But for those voters, all ballots need to be back from them by 8 days after the election as well. And then we have a new accessible at home ballot. This ballot's been available since 2019. There were a few changes in the last legislative session for voters with a visual disability, but these voters can access their ballot online. And then for most voters, they'll need to print it and sign the affidavit and return it. But certain voters with a qualifying visual disability can return it via our secure ballot system and return that with either a signed affidavit or a copy of their ID. So there's a lot of options and a lot of ways to track your ballot and make sure your ballot is in. I want to jump a little bit to voting system security because I think this is a really important topic right now, and I know a lot of folks have questions about it. So there's kind of 4 big components of voting system security. The first is certification. All equipment that's used in a state and federal election must be certified for use, and there's a 5-step process that we follow. application, document review, test plan, testing, and compliance review. And this is the same process for a totally new system or for an upgrade to an existing system. That testing is done by an independent federally accredited testing lab. They test over 930 requirements, and it includes an application penetration test to identify potential vulnerabilities and source code evaluation. So it's a pretty in-depth process, and we're continually working with the testing labs and with stakeholders to improve that process. Once the system or upgrade is certified, then we go through a process called Trusted Build, where our team actually installs the trusted certified version on all of the equipment. So it's kind of like a golden image process that you use in computer upgrades, where we have a copy of the computer's memory that can be placed directly onto the hard drive of another system. So it exactly mirrors the trusted and certified version. And then after it's installed, the county does acceptance testing to make sure it still performs properly. In terms of security requirements, we prohibit by rule connecting the systems to the internet. There are strict chain of custody requirements using seals and logs, and there's continuous video surveillance of certain equipment during critical election periods. And then, of course, we restrict access to background checked county personnel and election judges to that equipment. And then we test and we verify. So before every election, there is a hardware diagnostic and a public logic and accuracy test that's done by county election judges before every election, so that we make sure that the system is functioning properly before ballots are tabulated. All right, let's talk a little bit about results reporting and canvassing. So election night reporting is the unofficial posting of election results, and that gets posted shortly after the close of polls, updated continuously through the counting period. Once we get through the counting period, then we audit. And so we have a first in the nation risk limiting audit that we've done following every election since 2017. This gives us a statistical level of confidence that the outcomes are correct, that we announce the correct race winners. And the way this is done is that bipartisan teams review the paper ballot and record the voter selections in an independent audit system. And then the system compares what the judges recorded with how the voting system tabulated the results to determine whether we have matches. Sometimes there are discrepancies in the audit. And what we've found is those discrepancies are really the result of human error. Voters mark the ballot inconsistently, or judges make a mistake in pulling a ballot or recording that selection. And so discrepancies really show us the system is working properly. So we might audit multiple rounds to meet that risk limit, but what that means is that we work to make sure that there's no error or to disprove that there's any error. And then finally, we canvass and we certify. So representatives from the major party canvass state contests, and they confirm that there are no more ballots counted than cast, and that there are no more ballots cast than there are voters. And then the state consolidates all of the results from every county, and we publish the statewide abstract and the data files on our website. So by the time we get through the election, we have tested, we have audited, and then we have verified the results. So that was a really quick run through a lot of information. But before I hand it off to Molly, I do want to flag for you that we have our Facts Are Fun, Opinions Are Fun, Facts Are Better campaign. You can always get this link from govotecolorado.gov. But it's a lot of really good information about accurate election results. And the idea is we want to make sure that folks are looking to county clerks, to the state for that accurate information. And we've recently started a new Trusted Sources Tuesday campaign where we tweet out or put out on our Facebook feed really good information on Tuesdays, accurate information, and push folks to our website and again to the county clerks for that accurate election information. So let me hand it off to Molly. I know she's going to get a lot more into the processes in Boulder.
Great, thanks, Hilary. Hi, everyone. I am sharing my screen. Hilary, could you tell me really quick if you could see my screen?
Sure can.
Perfect, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Molly Fitzpatrick. I'm the clerk and recorder here in Boulder County. I want to apologize for not having my video up. I actually have the old-fashioned cold, so it's a bit easier for me to do this without video up. So first off, I want to thank the League for all the work you do in our community and also for facilitating and hosting this conversation. I think, as Hilary mentioned, it's an important conversation to have and a timely conversation to have. So I would be remiss if I did not go through a couple of key dates here. Just to highlight a few of these, we did have our logic and accuracy test that Hilary mentioned that all counties participate in. And this is a pre-election test of the voting system to ensure that everything is working accurately and correctly. And we did have bipartisan sign off attesting to the accuracy of our voting system. And then right now we are in the period where vote centers are open and it is too late to mail ballots. So please, if you're talking to people out in the community, let them know that it is too late to mail a ballot and that they need to go vote in person or drop off their ballot at a 24-hour drop box. And we also have our ballot to go service. So if any voter does not want to actually come into a vote center for health reasons or mobility reasons, we are able to do a curbside ballot delivery process for them. And then of course we have election day. Ballots must be received by 7 p.m. And in Colorado, we do have a timeline after election day for any voter that needs to cure their ballot so that they have that timeline to do so. And that is November 10th. And then military and overseas voters have until the 10th for their mail ballot to get back to our office. So the various ballot return options are here. Of course, it's too late again to mail in your ballot. And as Hilary mentioned, we really are an all option state in Colorado. Voters have flexibility in how they would like to return their ballot and vote. So mail ballot processing, the next two slides we'll do a high level overview of what mail ballot processing looks like here in Boulder County. Every step of the process is designed to enhance accuracy, security, and transparency. And there are many steps that we take during this process to support our post-election audit as well. And we know that there is a lot of public discourse around cybersecurity, and we also consider physical security to be just as important. And if you were to come to our ballot processing center, you would see throughout the operation that it's under camera 24/7 during election time. We have locked cages with restricted access. We have badged entry to get into secure areas. And in that badged entry, only the people that need to get in that space to do their jobs have that sort of access. We also ensure that all of the election judges and workers have name tags, so we know who is who and who should be where, and if we need to redirect anyone to their appropriate work area. We also have monitors throughout the ballot processing center for the public to see what we're doing, and we also have signage throughout the building so the public or the watchers can know what part of the process they are observing at any given time. So those are just some of the steps that we take in order to enhance security from a physical perspective. And then from an actual operation perspective to receive ballots. So the ballots are brought back to our office, checked in, they are moved from the ballot boxes and organized into mail trays to be sorted. And then the ballots are sorted on our sorter and signature capture machine. And the voter's signature image is captured for our judges. And in Boulder County, all of the signatures are reviewed by judges who are trained according to Secretary of State standards. And then we also layer on an additional training for our judges as well with a handwriting expert. Once a signature is verified, the voter is assigned vote credit in the statewide database, and the ballot envelope is securely transported to our second floor for opening and separating. So at this part of the state process, the ballot is still in its envelope. And as mentioned, once the signature has been verified and it's ready to go upstairs, it's brought up for extraction. So the ballot is getting separated from its envelope, and the image in the top right corner is our extraction machine. So we have an operator sitting on one side of this machine and the ballot envelope with the voter information is facing away from the worker. And that machine is slicing open the envelope, and the worker is able to pull out the ballot from its envelope, which maintains voter anonymity and secrecy. So from there, the bipartisan teams flatten and inspect ballots in preparation for scanning. So the ballots can be read by the scanning equipment. Sometimes we receive ballots that are damaged and that they have coffee or some sort of liquid on them that would impact the ability for our scanning equipment to read it. So we will have a bipartisan team inspect ballots in advance of going to the scanning room, and they will duplicate ballots in order for that voter's vote to be cast in the way that they intended. From there, ballots are scanned in batches and votes are captured. And then election night, captured votes are generated into results report and published to the public beginning at 7 p.m. And we know that there's been a lot of news out there about ballot envelope security, especially since 2020. And we want voters in Colorado to feel confident and to feel aware of everything that bakes in security of the mail ballot election model. And we have great appreciation for the hard work of the United States Postal workers in delivering mail ballots. Most voters in Colorado receive their mail ballots within just a matter of days. And in Colorado, we've maintained regular channels of communication with USPS. We have recurring calls with them either on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to ensure that any issues are brought to local election offices' attention and that they're mitigated quickly if there is an issue. We also have Ballot Track. As Hilary mentioned, this is a great tool. In Boulder County, we automatically enroll Boulder County voters in this free service, which allows voters to track the life cycle of their ballot. It also allows our office to get in touch with voters if there's any sort of issue that comes up when processing their envelopes, such as a rejected signature or no signature. In Boulder County, we also have a ballot delivery by zip code tool. And this tool allows us to see how ballot delivery is going and if there's ever any sort of issue with ballots getting to a particular zip code. And in that case, what we would do is work with USPS to determine what's going on and rectify the issue. However, we have not had that issue in Boulder County, but we do have that tool just as an added layer of security. And all of the information that I've talked about so far and that we'll talk about in the next couple of slides is demonstrated and written about in our election security community briefing report. This is a 20-page report that we developed last year, and it was released in September of 2020. And this briefing goes over the Colorado election model in Boulder County's approach to election security. And so we really want to highlight this as a great resource for all of you in working with the community, because we know that league members and folks on this call are interested in elections and therefore have a lot of credibility with your fellow neighbors. So we encourage you all to use this resource to give out to people that have questions about election security in Boulder County and in Colorado. So the report really details our three main pillars or our main approach to election security in Colorado. And our aim with this report was to demonstrate Colorado's election security in a way that is digestible, because there are so many different ways that we are secure and we have redundancies in place, we have checks and balances in place, but we wanted to make sure that it was really digestible. So we really condensed this thinking in three main buckets, which is the Colorado election model, partnerships, and then Boulder County's election cybersecurity program. Hilary already touched on just about everything that I would touch on with the Colorado election model. So I won't spend any time on this because I think she covered it really well. We also work really hard to leverage the partnerships that are available to us. As you all know, there has been an influx of support for election offices since 2016. And these are just a few of the great partnerships that we have that support us in enhancing our security posture every single year. To call attention to a few of these, of course, we have the partnership with the Secretary of State's office, who offers annual training opportunities, regular communication via phone calls. We have participation in tabletops where we're able to have staff actually practice executing contingency scenarios. And we know that the Secretary's office also expanded their cybersecurity team, who in turn supports local election offices. In Boulder County, we also have a great partnership with our law enforcement agencies. We have regular meetings before every single election, and then if anything comes up throughout the year for just situational awareness, we're in touch with them. And we also have partnerships with the EISAC, which is an organization that helps to facilitate communications about threats and cybersecurity awareness between the federal government, statewide, local election offices, et cetera. And we also have, we're fortunate to have a team member serving on the National EISAC committee. And then, of course, we have the Clerks Association. We have a great collaboration with clerks across the state in Colorado to share best practice and leverage best practices around security. We also have Boulder County's cybersecurity program. Again, there's so much information detailed in our cybersecurity or security report. And you can see that there's a lot of different resources available from the previous slides. We rely on the NIST framework, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology framework, to create the framework for our program. So the panel at the top really cuts across all that we do, and we consider all of these different aspects of security in our environment. You know, we do everything from regular tabletops to practice if the statewide voter registration system were to go down, or who our vendors are, how they think about security. And we do have templates when we bring on vendors to assess their own cybersecurity posture and what we're bringing into the environment. We also look at the different data that we have and how it's protected, who has access to it, and ensuring that only the people who need access to it have it. And then we just think about how we recover quickly if there is any sort of issue. So we have, again, a robust cybersecurity program. We also work with a cybersecurity consultant to help us think about cybersecurity and implement cybersecurity programs to improve our posture. There's also an important role for the voters. And again, you all are trusted leaders in your community. You're interested in elections. So we always like to encourage folks to think about the news that you're hearing and verifying it against trusted sources, whether it's our office or the Secretary's office, because there is, as mentioned, a lot of mis and disinformation out there. And sometimes these different parts of the election model can get conflated. So there's the statewide voter registration system. There's also the voting system. There's different types of voting equipment. And as mentioned, Colorado has a lot of things working together to ensure that the system is secure and that there's redundancies in place and that voters are able to have their voice heard with some contingency scenarios and available to them, such as provisional ballots, but really we don't need those because we have same-day voter registration and also mail ballot replacement. So we just encourage people to think about their role in election security and really uncollapsing all of these systems that tend to get collapsed in the narrative. We also have an election alert hotline that we wanted to bring to everyone's attention. We were receiving so many reports in the 2020 election about different kinds of concerns that voters had, and we wanted to have a way to organize all of the concerns in one place where folks could go. And so we created this election alert hotline, really just to manage the influx of mis and disinformation being reported to our office. And this allows us to maintain proper record keeping and escalating concerns quickly to law enforcement partners quickly and effectively and with information that they need to act on it. So this year, the email address is electionalert@bouldercounty.org, or you can use that phone number, which you'll be directed to leave a voicemail and someone will return your call. And we just expanded this offering to include Spanish language support. So that's all I have. I will hand it back over, but here's all of our different social media accounts if anyone is able to follow along, and especially on election night, we'll post election results. We'll let you know when those results are posted, and you can follow our social media accounts for the most up-to-date information there. So thank you, everyone.
Hi, this is Neil McBurnett. Can you hear my audio?
Loud and
Yes.
clear.
And can you see my screen?
Indeed.
Great.
Oh,
Hi, so I'm Neil
almost.
McBurnett. I'm a 22-year league member, and I've been active helping improve election integrity for decades, both locally and nationally. I'd like to thank Hilary and Mallory for their presentations. I'm proud to vote in Boulder County, and I'm proud of what Boulder and Colorado have accomplished. And I also know that elections are surprisingly complicated, and we still have work to do. I'm proud that we continue to innovate. I think a bit of history on how we got here can help us avoid partisanship and divisions and inspire us to work collaboratively. I think we can all remember how members of each party have had their doubts about elections over the last 2 decades. And partisans for the winning party have often discounted the concerns of the losers. It's only natural. At the same time, over the years, some vendors and administrators have overplayed the security of their systems. It's complicated. The league itself has played a role. In 2003, the National League had a favorable view of what we now know are deeply insecure paperless voting systems. That same year, Boulder was poised to buy a paperless system. Many local activists from 4 different parties demanded a voter verifiable paper ballot system instead, and we demanded audits of the results. Thankfully, the activists prevailed, and thankfully, 3 years later, the broader election integrity movement got the National League of Women Voters to reverse course and also demand voter verifiable paper ballots. Think what might have happened if we had failed. We could have had a much deeper meltdown in 2020. If we hadn't convinced the state of Georgia to adopt a voter verifiable paper ballot system, they could not have done the risk limiting audit, which was pivotal evidence that their outcome was correct. In fact, it would have been very hard to discount the possibility that their election had been hacked, given how insecure and fragile Georgia's previous paperless system was. It could have been much worse. Even now, our work is clearly not done. The latest challenge is how to avoid disenfranchising some voters with disabilities or voters who otherwise would have particular obstacles to getting a voter verified paper ballot back in time. Some call for widespread internet voting, known as mobile voting, but such systems can't provide a voter verifiable paper ballot. I note and underscore that all 4 federal agencies who are leading our election integrity efforts agree that even with our best defenses, the cybersecurity challenges of internet voting remain vast in the United States. They say that for the time being, internet voting should be reserved for only those voters who would otherwise be disenfranchised. I think that's wise advice. I'm delighted to report that right now, the Colorado County Clerks Association, in collaboration with myself and other experts, are working to continue to improve our systems and our elections. We want to get to the next goal of yet more fully evidence-based elections. That includes making our risk limiting audits even more transparent and independent. It includes finding more ways to audit our voter registration database and our voter eligibility and signature verification processes. We can take heart that despite our successes, so many election administrators and league members are not resting on their laurels here. So again, thanks to the great work of clerks and the Secretary of State's office. And yes, there are things that we want to improve. I think it's
so
time for
much.
questions.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. And thank you, Hilary and Molly. So this is Elizabeth Crow again, and we've got several questions, some of them a bit similar in the chat and in Q&A. So let me just summarize the first one. And Hilary, maybe we'll just start with you on this. A couple of questions specifically about the Dominion voting machines, obviously been in the news a lot. And just about your concern, if you have concerns about those use of those machines in our elections. And let's see, where was the other one here? And also just in the context of Mesa County, which you may or may not be able to address tonight, but just please share your thoughts about that particular voting machine, its use in elections here in Colorado, please.
Sure, absolutely. I think that's a really important question, especially with what we see going on in the news media right now. And I think it's important to talk about the Dominion system, the Clear Ballot system, the systems we use here in Colorado, and how we secure them. So I mentioned the testing by independent accredited test labs. So we do testing and then we install the trusted version of the software onto all of the equipment before it's used. And the trusted version of the software is provided directly to our office from the test lab, and it is maintained securely in our office. So no one has access to that trusted version except our staff, and that's why we install it in each county. And that's why the counties test once they receive that to make sure that it functions properly. But it's really about the layers of security and the layers that we put in place. And the next layer is then testing before the election. So bipartisan teams of judges in your county do the testing in your county before the election. And then bipartisan teams of judges do the processes that end up with tabulated ballots. And bipartisan teams of judges audit the equipment. So we test it before we use it and we make sure it's functioning properly, but then we audit the results to make sure that the way the voters mark the paper ballots is the way the system tabulated it. And we use a type of audit that gives us, as I said, a statistical level of confidence in that. And that's because we look at the actual paper ballots and we verify those marks. And so really it's about those layers of processes. And in addition to that, we limit who has access to the equipment. And much like Molly said, in terms of cybersecurity and in terms of physical security, we look at who needs access based on their job duty. And then we also make sure that they've been background checked and that we have all of the security measures in place. So we limit access and we make sure that it's job specific in terms of who has access. But we also put it under surveillance during key election periods. So the tabulation software and all of the voting equipment is under surveillance right now because we want to make sure that if anyone unauthorized accesses it, that we have documentation to go back and make an investigation if we need to do that. So we limit access, we surveil to make sure there's no unauthorized access, we use seals, we use logs, so that we make sure that if anybody opens something they shouldn't, that we have tamper evident seals. And we have logs to show who's accessed things, whether it's key logs, card access logs, logs for the seals and the seal numbers. It's a really big component of all of our equipment and ballot security in the election. And Colorado's model and Colorado's use of voting equipment is really dependent on all of those layers. And it's everything from human to systems, to access, to logging and just monitoring. All of those layers, I think, are key components. And then fundamentally, we have paper ballots in Colorado, which is critical to being able to do the audit that we do.
Thanks, Hilary. Molly, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think Hilary covered it all. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Hilary. Just a couple of quick follow-up questions, I think, to some of the issues you were just sharing. One is, could you just review the components of a full forensic audit? We've had a couple of questions just about full forensic audits. So can you just explain a little bit more about that?
Actually know what a full forensic audit is. I know what a test is. I know what a risk limiting audit is. I think that there's this term that's being used right now called a full forensic audit, and I don't think any of us understand what that really means. What I think is important to know, about our security is that Colorado processes, the Colorado model is very specific to Colorado. And our model is really dependent on our citizen election judges who perform those duties and who really are verifying all of the steps of our election process. So bipartisan teams of judges, our friends, our neighbors, our family who are doing that work, but then also dependent on the security rules and the security layers, password management, air gapping, segmentation, those types of things. those are what are really foundational to our election model. And layered within that are testing and auditing components. But this concept of a full forensic audit is just not something that we don't understand what folks are asking for, if that makes sense.
Thanks. And there are a couple of follow-ups to that in the chat. I do want to we've got several other questions as well. So let me just go to one, another, I think, quick follow-up. Are Dominion logs available to the Canvas panel for inspection after the election?
No, the Canvas panel's job really is to balance the election. So security logs and those types of things are really outside the scope of the Canvas for its model. What I would really recommend to anyone who has questions about the election or has concerns about the equipment is volunteer as an election judge or a poll watcher, and really get in there and see how the process works and understand the process from start to finish.
And just to add on to one thing that Hilary said is, if you don't have time to be an election judge or an election worker, the logic and accuracy test, where we do that pre-election testing of the voting system and the post-election risk limiting audit, those are open to the public and typically only take a day to a couple of days max. And those are great opportunities to see firsthand what the type of tests are that we're conducting, and also to see the bipartisan work that it takes in order to get those tests complete. So that's another opportunity as well.
This is Neil, and I just want to jump in to emphasize those points. You know, as a computer scientist, I thankfully don't have to trust Dominion. I don't even have to trust the ability of the Secretary of State or the clerks to secure those systems. Computers can be fragile. So I don't want to have to trust those things. And that's why we introduced voter verifiable paper ballots and risk limiting audits. And that really is the thing that allows me to relax and say, wow, we're actually putting evidence behind the elections, evidence that in the audits, regular citizens, and I totally agree, people should volunteer. Look at the paper ballot, they look at the system's interpretation of the same paper ballot, and they see if they match. It's a very impressive system.
Thanks, Neil. Another question here is, I think, referring to one of the points you made, Hilary. How many, in your earlier answer, how many accredited test labs are there?
You know, I don't know off the top of my head. I think there are just a couple of accredited test labs. 2, I believe.
Thank you. A couple other questions here. When a person registers, what kind of documentation is needed to prove they are an eligible citizen? Can you speak just to that question of eligibility?
Sure. So when a person registers to vote, they complete the application and answer several questions. They affirm to their citizenship. They provide their address, their residential address, which tells us where they're eligible to register, their date of birth, which tells us they're old enough. The registration is really about an affirmation. Now, when you go into a DMV, if you are automatically registered through the driver's license office, that only happens if you show documentation that establishes citizenship. Otherwise, you're offered the opportunity to get registered at a later date. But when you register to vote on a paper form, you make that affirmation.
Thank you. Molly, I think it was you who in your presentation was talking about drop boxes, and wonder if you can address the question here about monitoring of those drop boxes 24/7.
Yes, so all of the drop boxes are required to have video surveillance running on those drop boxes. So We do periodic checks throughout the day to observe the drop boxes, ensure that the cameras are working accurately, and also just to ensure that everything at the drop box is looking good. And then, of course, as mentioned, if voters ever are, or residents are ever see something concerning around the drop box, they can report it to our office using that election alert hotline information, or they can call our front office and we'll look into it. But yes, all of the drop boxes do require and maintain video surveillance during election time.
Thank you. Another question is, in federal elections, how do you confirm the voter is only registered in one place? Either one of you want to address that question?
No, I can take a first run at it. I think that's hard because one thing that we know about elections is that they're very different in every state and different requirements, different processes. And so there's no national voter registration list. So the way that we handle that is that we are constantly using those list maintenance procedures to make sure that we are canceling records for voters who've moved to other jurisdictions. And, you know, post-election, we also work with the Electronic Registration Information Center, which is a coalition of states that exchange voter registration information. So if a voter is registered and voted in more than one state in a federal election, then we work with law enforcement to investigate and refer that for prosecution.
Thanks. Molly, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
No, Hilary's covering it great. Thank you.
Okay. So a couple of questions from one of our league members about election security as a part of cybersecurity. Neil, this is something that you've done some work on, and some other of our league members, and just in kind of as part of our national mission and role, and wonder if you just want to talk a little bit about that. Maybe not super deep in the weeds for folks who are not league members, but just what that looks like in terms of local, state, and national advocacy for that.
So the League of Women Voters of Oregon has put together a position trying to actually, in some senses, make the national position stronger, to make risk limiting audits a firm part of the national position. A bunch of folks here, including the president of the league in Colorado and others that have worked nationally, are trying to add our own spin on the best way to phrase that and the best sorts of things to call for. There's a very active voting methods team. Celeste Landry has, and many others, Gaithia Weiss, have made that team really look carefully at evidence and at science and at how, something we really haven't talked about here, how the voting method is very important, and helped a national position get formed calling for proportional representation, for example, which I think would help represent people better. So there's a local team here. We encourage folks to join the league if they're not already members, or to get active if they are.
Thank you. So we also have a question about Molly, and again, I think it was you in your presentation who was talking about use of, or the coordination that you do in advance of elections with law enforcement. There's a question here about kind of National Guard deployment regarding cybersecurity. Hilary, either you or Molly want to just kind of follow up on that and share what those partnerships look like, and what some reasons may or may not be for, for relying on those agencies to help with election security.
Yeah, why don't I chime in first on the Guard in particular, and maybe Molly has some additional thoughts on kind of local partnerships. We've actually partnered with the National Guard for a number of years here in Colorado to help us secure our statewide voter registration system and monitor for potential threats during key election periods. We partner not only with the Guard, but with also the Kayak, which is Colorado's law enforcement fusion center, with Department of Homeland Security, and with local law enforcement partners and the county clerks, to make sure that we're constantly monitoring and constantly working to close doors for potential threats. I mentioned that it's really about layers, and one of those layers is having a really proactive defense process, especially for the statewide voter registration and for election day activities.
Yeah, and I would just add on the local side, we, as mentioned, do have a great partnership with local law enforcement, and we have meetings before each election to review anything that may have changed in state statute or in rulemaking that we may need support in enforcing, because things change, and we want them to have that situational awareness and context. We also ensure that our district attorney's office is included in that conversation as well. And we work to ensure that we are maintaining situational awareness from everybody. So if they're hearing any reports of things that's important for us to know about and vice versa, that we're maintaining that regular channel of communication. And also that we are talking to the right people, because when we get in the moment of election day where there's chaos and the situation needs to be addressed quickly, we want to make sure that those communication structures are really well established and that we can get people together quickly to resolve issues so voters can vote quickly and we can continue to carry on our statutorily required duties to execute the election. So those partnerships are incredibly important and valuable to us.
Thank you so much. So we just have a couple minutes left here. Let's see, another question regarding who has access to the server that tabulates votes?
So I can speak about that generally, and then maybe Molly might want to chime in with some Boulder County specific processes. But in general, the folks with access to the server that tabulates votes is very limited. So rule limits the number of folks who can have password access. And then there are rules about the number of folks who can actually be in that same room when ballots are being tabulated. That is one of the areas that must be under 24/7 video surveillance during the election period. And again, those rules about access also cover things like, the air gapping and the password management and those sorts of things. So again, very strictly limited to the necessary county election staff and judges who need access.
Yeah, exactly. And I would just say, in addition to the user accounts, the unique passwords, they have to meet certain requirements of complexity. So they're not easily guessable by anybody. And to Hilary's point, limited people, highly secure room that's under video surveillance. I do not have access to that room. And you have to have badged entry with the credentials. And we review those badged entry regularly. So.
Well, we are at the bottom of the hour. Thank you so much to Hilary and to Molly for your presentations and for answering all of these questions. Before we end, I want to turn it back over to Neil McBurnett, one of our local league members again. Thank you, Neil, for your comments and perspectives and for your offer to engage with folks. Neil has put his email address in the chat for folks who do want to reach out, who really do want to work to improve election integrity. So we appreciate that. Neil, go ahead and close us out.
I hope my fan doesn't make it too hard for me to speak. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a thank you for joining us for this presentation. And actually, I can do it that way. Is that still visible? Hopefully a little bit larger. So there's an organization, there's a vote411.org, which is a website that keeps you up to date with all kinds of things about elections that we partner with as part of the league. There's an organization, a part of the league called Women Power Democracy, which is working and engaging with democracy, with the franchise, making sure that everyone who's eligible to vote can get, avoiding misinformation and disinformation, and really trying to provide credible information and clear ideas on how to move forward. And then we've been very involved in the Fair Maps project. So trying to have a redistricting process that is not controlled by any party, that's got a lot of citizen involvement. And so we've worked hard on the redistricting that has just completed recently. So please join us. We've got a website at the League of Women Voters, bouldercounty.org, lwvbc.org. And democracy, we know you care about democracy. Join us. You can donate to the League, support the mission, and help us move forward.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and have a wonderful rest of the evening. Remember to encourage all your family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, everyone to get out there and vote by November 2. Thank you.